Hello, welcome back to the Oracle Parlor podcast. I'm so excited because today in the parlor, if you are watching this, you will see quite a magical, lovely person has joined me in the parlor today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to all our listeners?
Hello, I am Teri Hendrich C, and I'm an artist and astrologer. Online, I go by Color Sorceress for my art, and for my astrology practice, I go by Cosmic Consults, and my pronouns are she, her.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Terry.
Yeah, of course. I'm honored to be here.
I'm so excited because, I feel like it's very rare as someone who was in the artistic animation industry to know someone from that industry who is still in my field of magical view, like you. For anyone who's listening, I actually met Terry through a art director program, mentorship, and that's really how we met. And it's funny because I didn't realize that you were into astrology until much later. And now we talk about astrology, we talk about art, I've gone to your art shows. And so today I would just love for you to be able to share who you are, what it is that you do as someone who is astrologically and artistically like influenced by all these magical energies. So, how did you get into art in the first place? I'd love to hear about that.
Okay, well, my art journey started when I was a child and, the typical kid just liking to draw and paint. And I was really like shy and introverted then. So to me, having a medium in which I could visually express myself and not have to say anything was like perfect for me.
Yes.
So yeah, so I kind of just ran with it, although I didn't really take it seriously until like I was in high school. And by then I was like, okay, I think, this is what I'll do for a career. And even went through the process of going to junior college first because I was like, okay, I just have to be extra sure this is
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
want to do. Because, it's not easy being an artist. So it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, I just want to make sure that, like, I still really want to do this. And, at the end of all of it, it was like, yes. So then that's when I finally pursued like a bachelor's at Art Center. And my
Mm,
focus was illustration and fine art. So I've always kind of been sort of between the two worlds of like commercial art and then more kind of fine art, like personal expression.
mm,
Yeah.
awesome. And you work today in animation.
Yeah, I mean, so, in trying to just find sort of like a stable-ish career as an artist, like I
Yeah.
landed in animation kind of unexpectedly. It was just kind of more out of the fact that I happened to have grown up here in Los Angeles, so it was like the job that was just right at
Yeah.
my back door. Um, so yeah, once I started working in the industry, I was like, oh, okay, this is a place where I could actually like earn a pension and like, get vacation days versus like being a, freelance illustrator.
Mm,
And so yeah, so I've been working in animation for the last 17 years. And yeah, so most of my focus was really just working in the industry and only in the last, I would say like 3 years is when I refocused my attention on my personal art because I kind of had let it just go completely by the wayside since, animation was just
yeah.
dominating my attention. And also in while working in animation, that's where I met like my husband and then, we started a family.
Oh.
So all these things happened where it was like my like own painting career sort of was on the back burner.
Mm,
But in 2021 is when I just had like this very strong pull in me of like, okay, you have to make something again, like for yourself. And
yes.
so I took that, energy like seriously and dedicated like a certain amount of time each week, which I mean, literally was just a few hours, but I was like, okay, as long as I do something, it'll build. So
Yeah.
I would just go into my art studio and mess around with paint and whatever came
Hmm.
out like or whatever I could get done within the few hours like then at least it was something. And so over time now I've kind of built back up my own like fine art career, and I'm actually in the process of um, approaching like galleries for representation, which is something I haven't done just
Yes.
because I feel like I just didn't have enough organization or a body of work to really do that. But I feel like now, after these few years, I've kind of gotten to a place where I've kind of always wanted to be really for my like personal art career.
That's lovely. I love your story. I also didn't know that you met Jack through the animation industry, who's also an astrologer, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so I met Jack on my first show that was union. And
Mm.
so yeah, he was just there. Got to know him. And of course it was like this awkward thing of like, oh, should I date the person like I'm working
Yeah.
next to? Um, but it kind of just it felt like it just worked. And yeah, we got like engaged within like 6 months of dating. So
Oh
it
my
was one of
goodness.
those kind of
Yeah,
whirlwind,
yeah.
I guess, romance things. And yeah, so we got married and yeah, did the whole 9 yards. Now have two kids.
Oh, I love that. That's so precious. And also you had mentioned like creating a body of work so that way you can start going to gallery shows and start putting yourself out there in that way. And I have been to one of your gallery shows at the Animation Guild, which was absolutely fabulous. What was the title of that show?
That was my solo show, Venus in the 12th. And
Yes.
yeah, I had was inspired to create a body of work based on the astrological themes I was learning from looking at my own natal chart. So essentially, the show is kind of more biographical, but there is kind of this narrative in there that I feel like is universal, or a lot of people can identify with. So yeah, I was inspired to create um, just over a dozen works that kind of all fit within that theme. And yeah, it was an opportunity where I was able to use that gallery space at our Union Hall and essentially put on my own show, like what I had already always dreamed of with like the title cards and like hors d'oeuvres for the opening and things like that. So
It
yeah.
was absolutely magical, not just because it was like a really well put together gallery show with really beautiful pieces, but just the themes of it as well. And it's really cool because as somebody who understands visual storytelling and understands astrology, it was like a double whammy where I could go and appreciate your art as a visual story, but I could also appreciate, oh, I see how the influences that you're taking from your own astrological chart and telling that story in this really really beautiful way. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, but before we get too much into that, how did you get into astrology and what kind of astrology do you do?
Well, it was actually my husband Jack who introduced me to the world of astrology. He started, I think he was just like listening to podcasts and he somehow found his way into like listening to astrology podcasts and came across Chris Brennan, who is the host of the Astrology podcast,
Yeah.
and was inspired to take his course on Hellenistic astrology. And this was
Mm.
maybe back in, I think, 2016, which is when I had given birth to our first child. So that's where my focus was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was taking the course and he would come and tell me the things he was learning. Since before that, I actually did not really, I guess, identify that much with astrology just because I didn't really know it that well. So yeah,
Mm.
when we were kind of in that like art director like
Yeah.
cohort, I don't think I was really that tuned in with astrology because I always
Mm.
grew up hearing like, oh, you're a Leo, because that's what my sun sign is. But I don't really identify with
Yeah.
the energy of Leo that much. And I now know why.
Mm.
But because of that, I
Yep.
just kind of dismissed it. And I was like, well, that doesn't really apply to me. And then when Jack went through the course and learned astrology himself, he told me like, well, yeah, it kind of makes sense because you have a Libra stellium and you're a Libra rising. So you're
There
both.
it is.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense now. And,
Yeah.
um, so And, through the years, he would tell me things like, oh, like he actually knew, he kind of had a hunch even before COVID hit that something big was going to happen
Mm,
because
yeah.
he knew he had studied the fact that Pluto and Saturn, when they are conjunct, it usually brings
Mm,
forth some major like
yeah.
event that tends to not be so great. So he was already like freaking out before it even happened. And when it did happen, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you were right.
There it
Like,
is. Yep.
yeah, like here it is. And so then I would just start asking him other things, like just even in my personal life, I'd be like, hey, can you look at my chart? Like, why is this week weird or something? And I asked him enough times that he was just like, you could just learn astrology. Like, I'm sure you'd be good at it. Um, so then that was now like 2022 is when I was like, okay, well, at that time I had actually already signed up to do the gallery show and I gave myself a full year because I'm like, I want as much time as possible to be able to work on this. And I was becoming more and more interested and inspired to learn astrology. And I felt like, okay, well, if I'm going to make a body of work about astrology, then I need to actually learn it. So I'm not just there kind of like fronting that
Yeah, yeah,
all this information. So then I signed up to Austin Coppock's year one Fundamentals of Astrology course, which who happens to be the other co-host of the astrology podcast. So it is kind of
Oh,
interesting that
that's funny.
Jack and I kind of both learned under different teachers, but who are both kind of known in the same sphere. Um, so the astrology that I learned through him is kind of a mix of traditional and modern. Um, and so like I use like the whole sign house system and the
Mm.
tropical zodiac. Although after taking his class, I kind of landed on another astrologer named Ada Pembroke. And
Mm.
her whole kind of brand is that she teaches narrative astrology.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, that's interesting. That like, because I want to build a narrative here with my
yeah.
clients.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I'll sign up to her course too. So I also studied under her, and she also blends in ideas of evolutionary astrology, which
Mm.
has to do more with like your past and like future life energy.
Mm.
So yeah, so I do have a little bit of a blend of kind of education backgrounds. Yeah.
That's really cool. I also love that you were really diving deep into astrology because you were doing this art show and you were like, okay, I really want to get serious about this. And it was also like your first big gallery where you were creating a whole collection of pieces. So it felt like a really magical, liminal, transformative time for you to really like blossom in this new way as an artist and as like a magical person. And I just really love that. That's so cool. I didn't know that part of your story. That's very interesting.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well, yeah, and well, I did actually introduce legitimate like magic into my gallery
Yes.
show, which is something I sort of learned through Austin Coppock because he actually has a whole kind of company that he shares with his wife, and it's called Sphere and Sundry. And they
Mm,
make like I would say very high end, almost like couture, like talismanic materia is how they call it. So things like oils and
mm,
candles and even like physical talismans. And it's all based on, certain elected moments in time that happen to capture like a certain like planetary energy, since the
yeah.
idea is that if you look ahead and see kind of what the planets are doing, and if you want to kind of take advantage of like a certain in time,
Hmm.
then if you can time whatever like project or whatever it is that you want to create, like at that moment, then you've essentially given it that birth chart. So the idea is
That's
like
cool.
you're kind of preserving this energy into a physical object.
Hmm.
So I had already kind of been aware of the idea of astrological elections through the astrology podcast because Chris Brennan in the monthly forecast, he always tells the audience like, oh, hey, this day is a good day for, doing, initiating a project generally.
Hmm.
And so I basically took the information he was already sharing publicly, and I was like, okay, well, now I'll use that as my signal to start these artworks. And
Cool.
I did even go a little bit deeper than simply what he was, um, I guess, offering in terms of elections, because when it comes to astrological magic, like you really want to align like several things. Ideally, like if you're focusing on a planet, then ideally you're doing it on that planetary day. And if you can
Hmm.
even get it to be on that planetary hour, like that's even better. And you also want to pay attention to what the moon is doing, because you want it to be aspecting a planet. Otherwise, it would be considered void. And when the moon is void and not aspecting the planet, then that's not really great.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
there's lots of considerations to look at, and it's
Yeah.
more than what Chris Brennan actually goes over when he offers an election, because the way he does it is not necessarily about astrological magic. It's just more of a general, like, oh, this seems to be a good moment in time. Whereas I'll look at it like further to see, okay, can I
Yeah.
actually use this for like planetary magic?
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, I love that. I would love for you to talk more on how you blended astrology with art and what you do when you do that. Like, because I know you're talking a little bit about like working with, for anybody who doesn't know, who's maybe not into astrology, that there's certain planets associated with certain days as well as hours, like you were saying. And so I would love to hear how you create art that blends and uses and calls upon that planetary energy in that magical way.
Yeah, well, right now, basically, I try and plan out my paintings in advance. So I'll start to get ideas of like kind of images I want to paint, and figure out compositions. And so I basically try and get like a series of works ready to go and basically lined up. So then there, I have canvases ready to paint on the moment that an election happens. So that's one thing, is trying to plan ahead.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's hard to do spontaneously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which is why I've kind of now shifted where I feel like I probably with my artwork will have like sort of a subdivision of works that are astrologically elected and have like these magical qualities, and then I'll have like another set of artworks that probably I won't be able to do that with. Otherwise, I'll be stuck and not be able to paint that often. Because the reality
Yeah.
is that these moments in like these really auspicious moments in time, they only happen like once or twice a year, like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really good elections. So that's why I'm like, okay, well, obviously I need to be painting a little bit more,
Yeah.
just once or twice a year. So yeah, that's why I probably will have like separate collections. But yeah, for most of the works that I made for that gallery show, they were elected and thought of in advance. And for me, the planets, or at least, well, yes, the planets that I tend to work with more are Venus, the moon, and Jupiter,
Mm,
particularly because, well, at least Jupiter and Venus are both benefic planets, so they're just kind of like
mm.
a positive, good
Yeah.
type of energy. Um, Planets like Mars and Saturn, however, they're considered malefics, so those are kind of more like you got to be careful what you're doing, otherwise it
Hmm.
could like backfire on you. And actually, um, in reading about like ancient like mages who like utilized this type of practice with astrological magic, they also would do elections for ill purposes. Like if they wanted to curse someone, then they probably would
Yes.
like take advantage of like Mars or
Yeah.
Saturn and create like a kind of a bad omen kind of talisman. So there is
Yes.
that aspect to it, but for me, I'm only focusing on the positive and trying to bring kind of good energy to my art. And
Oh, yeah.
hopefully, then the idea is if or when someone, collects a piece of art, then they're also bringing in that kind of astrological, like good magic energy
That
into the
energy.
space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's amazing that you mentioned that because that like as someone who is highly sensitive to feeling and sensing energies, when I walked into the gallery room of your art show at the Animation Guild, there was such a shift in the energy in the room overall. And I was like, whoa, this is intense. This is really cool. And then when I went to every single art piece, they were radiating their own sort of emotional, energetic signature, which was so cool because it was like activating these different aspects of these planetary energies. And the one piece that I was like really, 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 really attracted to, and I was like, oh my God. And it was just like super radiating energy, was this beautiful book that you had, which was kind of the story piece, I feel like, for the entire show. And it really was telling the whole story of what this collection was. Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so in creating the paintings that kind of, when you line them up together, do create a narrative. Um, well, in creating the show, I was like, oh, I really want to make an art book because I wanted to go all out with this being like my
Yes.
premiere kind of official solo gallery show. So I was like, oh, like, I've been to other sh art shows of artists where they had like a catalog of the work, and I was like, I want to do that, and like, I'm just gonna self-publish it. So once I had that in my mind, I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to publish a book, then I need like words to go with it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, I'll make a poem. And I was actually inspired by a real poem by Lord Alfred Tennyson, and which was called Lady of Shalott. And a lot of the themes of that poem just happened to like weave really well with what
Mm.
I was seeing in my natal chart. And so I basically used that as inspiration to create my own poem. And I really thought a lot about it. Like I real since of course, like since I am primarily an artist, even though I
Mhm.
do enjoy writing, since I was considering it sort of my first official like poem, like I went like read over it for like months before I felt like it was perfect and at a place where I wanted it to be. But yeah, so it's basically the poetry kind of version of the story that you're seeing visually. And I figured for the presentation of within the gallery space, it would be nice to put it in kind of like a story time book, like kind of,
Yes.
with the pages open, and kind of like hand drawn, like calligraphy. So that's what I was going for. So yeah, that piece was exclusively something that really only visitors of the show got to experience.
It was so cool because one, I mean, you had this like written word, this poetry that you had created to pair with all these beautiful paintings. But also because you had presented it in this form of this like beautiful storybook that had art in it, it felt like a very physical representation of all of the themes and ideas that you were telling with the overall show. And it was just really cool because it felt, to me at least, it felt extra magical because I mean, what's more magical than like you think about like spell books and grimoires, and even for anyone here who lives in LA recently, at the beginning of the year and through parts of last year at the Getty, they had a whole exhibit around these gorgeous, gorgeous tomes of astrology from medieval times. And this book that you had really felt similar to these like astrological tomes from medieval times, but it had this beautiful poem in it. And it just radiated such beautiful energy. And I really that piece had stuck out to me. And not only that, but like as someone who also is an animation nerd, it also reminded me of like the old storybook openings in Disney movies like Sleeping Beauty. And I was just like, oh, that's so cool. It's so classic.
Well, yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned the show at the Getty because what I was inspired by was a show at the Huntington Library here, because they did have a gallery exhibit dedicated to Disney. So they actually
Um,
showed those books that
oh my
were
gosh.
illustrated for the movies like Sleeping Beauty. So when I saw that, I'm like, okay, well, that's what
There
I'm
it
going to
is.
do for my show.
Yes. Oh man, I bet that was so cool to see in person.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Were they big or were they small? I gotta
They
know.
were actually pretty big. Yeah, I think
I
maybe
have,
even a
yeah.
little bigger than what I had created for my show. Yeah.
Just because like on camera you can never tell if it's like something that's like massive or not. So I'm like, ooh, I gotta know. That's so cool. So I'm curious, do you have any magical practices or rituals that you do when you're creating your art? So I know you said you take into mind the different astrological energy that comes into it, but um, I'm curious, do you like put any intention into the canvas or the paint or anything like that? I would love to know if you're willing to share.
Sure. Well, anytime I work in my studio, one of the first things I do is I'll burn a bit of Palo Santo. I actually have matches that are made of Palo Santo, so it's kind of
Ah,
convenient. So
yes.
I'll light a match and light a candle at
Hmm.
the same time. And it's usually one of my like magical candles that either I've made or I got from like Sphere and Sundry or something along those lines. And I, ask that, my guides and spirits help clear the space and, any negative energy be
Yeah.
gone, essentially.
Yeah.
And then I call in the planet Venus and ask
Mhm.
her to kind of be with me and share her energy as like I, take part in this creative process just because Venus is the planet of
Yeah.
creativity and art and beauty. So it feels aligned to ask her for
Yeah.
help. Um, and yeah, and then I just start painting. And when I am creating a canvas or like working on a artwork from the start, I will still try and see like, okay, what time is it? Like what are the planets doing? So
Yeah.
I actually started three artworks just last week and I wouldn't necessarily consider them like talismanic because like it wasn't like super amazing, but it was still like a nice moment in time. So I was like, okay, this is nice enough to at least, you know, make these artworks. And in the process of putting like the first coats of paint down, I actually have like squeeze bottles that kind of I use to like keep paint in and kind of pour paint out of. So I'll actually use the squeeze bottle to make either like glyphs to like a
Mm.
planet or, all right words like that I want the, a painting to evoke. Um,
How
which for
cool.
me, I'm super romantic, so like I always like love is like a word that I'll draw in paint on the canvas, and then like I brush it in, and like then it becomes part of like the first coat of that painting.
That's amazing. I love that you set the space that you're going to be working in and you call in these energies and then you go that extra level of imbuing those energies with different sigils and words with your intention into the canvas itself. That's so cool. What a beautiful blend of magic and art. I remember when I used to work in animation on like visual development stuff, and I'd be asked just to kind of like, I don't know, do something, have fun, and then give us something good. And I'd kind of panic. And sometimes I would set the space in my office, light some incense, and invite in the energies of Venus. Or sometimes I'd work with the muses and I'd be like, I need inspiration because I have no idea what I'm drawing. They don't know what they want. Please give me something. And I always felt like that helped because not only is it helping me personally, like mentally, internally, getting me into the headspace, but it also like sets that intention, sets that space for magical play and inspiration and exploration. So I love that you play with those things in your art and in your craft. I would love to hear your thoughts on the intersection between art and magic itself, or art and astrology, or energy,
Yeah.
emotions.
Well, even before I made like the artworks for that gallery show, which were intentionally meant to evoke like
Yeah.
magical qualities, the art I had made before, I still would see people interact with them or experience the artworks in a way that I had intended. And like some of these artworks are abstract, so like you would like I wouldn't know like someone would feel the way I felt the moment I was beginning that artwork, but it really came through like whatever intention you're putting onto something, like the viewer will feel it. So
Yes.
yeah. So and this was so again, before I even was doing the whole like astrology and magic part of it. so in witnessing that, I'm like, oh, okay, like I can actually really lean into this and
Mm,
put even more intention and energy into like these pieces. So yeah, I feel like it's just organically there. Like I do feel like being an artist is kind of like being a magician. Like I know people say like, oh,
yes.
it's magic, like you can draw all those things. It's like, well, it's more than that. Like it's also conveying like an energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. It really is. And it's so cool that even before you were blending intentionally, magic and astrology into your craft, that you were already seeing this and kind of recognizing it, being like, huh, that's interesting that they were able to sense what I sensed, felt what I felt, like that it was still able to evoke an emotion. And it's funny because I had an experience one time back when I was in college. One of the things they would often tell you to do if you ever go to school for art is go to this museum and go look at some art from this specific era or this specific artist, and then write a paper about what you saw, what you experienced, what you thought, and then do some research on the art itself. And so I love art history, but I am not a fan of modern art. I've never been a fan of modern art. And so in my modern art history class, we were told, okay, go look at this specific time period at this specific museum in LA. So I went and I was very nonplussed. The only like modern artist that I really like is like Frida Kahlo, but that's because Frida has a lot of visual storytelling in her work. And so I was just kind of walking around, and from across the room in this modern art exhibition was this very simple, almost black canvas with these circles painted on it that seemed to almost glow. And the way that this super simple yet absolutely gorgeous, absolutely stunning painting made me feel so many emotions and so many different things from something so simple. Because, like I said, I was interested in visual storytelling within art, illustration. An illustration is a visual that can portray and show us without having to say anything a whole story. And yet here I was looking at this simple painting of some circles, some lines on like an almost black canvas, and I was so deeply moved, like it just hit this deep resonant chord with me. And I am totally blanking on the name of the artist, so I will absolutely put it in the show notes, and I will even try to find an image to link to all the listeners who want to check out this piece. And I tell you, it does not hit the same when you see it online as it does in person. But it's funny because when I saw this piece, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I wonder if I'm sensing what this artist had poured into this work. I'm wondering if maybe there was something going on in this artist's life, or what was going on. And then many, many, many years later, literally, I think last year, I found out because I really started getting into doing research on paranormal, just paranormal research and metaphysics. And one of the interesting things that I was like reading up a lot on is thought forms. So for anyone who doesn't know what a thought form is, it is I'm going to give you the short version. It's essentially where you are projecting an idea or a belief so intently onto an item or just in a space in an area that it creates a thought form. It's this energy that kind of takes on its own signature, and sometimes can even, in the belief, it may even become sentient if it's given enough energy and fed. And so I found out through this, doing all this research on people and thought forms, that apparently this artist who created this piece of work that I was obsessed with and felt so drawn to was obsessed with the idea of thought forms in art. And I was so shook because I realized, oh my gosh, he intentionally put this energy into this canvas, into this painting, into the oils, into everything, to the point that today, seeing it across the room at a gallery had me jaw on the floor, like I was feeling all different things. And so I strongly, strongly believe in this idea of pouring one's energy into the things that we are creating, that it not only can take a bit of our own personal energetic signature and embed it into it, but you can also choose the things that you want that thing to take on. Kind of like how you were talking about where you were tapping into Venus and you were like, okay, I'm going to write love. I'm going to write different sigils that have to do with this love and connection because it's all about Venus in the 12th. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Walking into that gallery show that I felt like, oh, wow, there's this like really beautiful energy here because it resonated with that, you know?
Yeah, no, that's incredible to hear. Now I'm interested to know that artist as well, and now I'm gonna like look up thought forms.
Yes, yes. No, it's really interesting. And it's funny because like how I found out about this artist was like really into thought forms was I was looking at some like book that had to do with it's again I will link it in the show notes everyone. I'm so sorry I don't have it on hand. But there's a illustration book that someone made about ghosts. And in it they talk about everything from like mediums and seances to ghost hunters and ghost adventures and ghostbusters. And in it they mention this artist and in the section of thought forms. And I was like, no way. And then I went and Googled it and I was like, this is the same artist. Just, it's so stunning. So I'll try to even take a photo from that book and share it in the description of this episode. But yeah, I personally feel like when I'm in a state of creating art, it can be very similar to how it can sometimes feel when I'm in a magical or psychic mindset in that liminal space. I believe that when we're creating in a creative flow state, it is a magical liminal space similar to when we are tapping into our intuition. And I would love to know if you have any personal experiences, thoughts, or feelings around this where you have like been in the zone as an artist and have just felt like you were kind of like channeling that energy or that feeling.
Well, with my art practice, generally I feel like the more intuitive bursts of creation happen completely in my own head and I'll just like a kind of the I suppose like a flash of like visual idea will pop in my mind, and that's when I'll be inspired to like sit down and try to like recreate it, or kind of like draw it out.
Mm.
Although, because like once I've kind of planned out what I'm gonna do, then it becomes a much more, I would say, like Saturnian process where I'm not necessarily so like in tune with, I guess, Venus. It's kind of more of like much more processed, like straightforward of like, okay, now I need to make sure that this figure is in
Yes.
perspective and like everything makes sense.
Light, shadow, form, all the structure.
Yeah, and even after I lay down that first coat of paint, which is a little bit more intuitive and maybe spontaneous, then it's like, okay, now I'm in the structure zone of like, I need to make sure
Mm,
that where I'm putting this brush stroke is where I want it to be. So it's going to line up over here. And so I kind
yes.
of lose that more lucid creative like vibe when I'm actually in the middle of like working to finish a painting. So yeah, I feel like the more like intuitive bursts come at the very beginning of like
That's
where even
awesome.
like the ideas even come from.
Yes, that sounds almost like a clairvoyant or claircognizant moment of just like suddenly this burst of like, I know what I need to do. I saw the visual. I have this sudden inspiration. Like your intuition's just like, psst.
Yeah, well, yeah, I wish now I knew the title of this book, but there was a book I read like just a few years ago where they talked about like creative ideas as essentially kind of being thought forms that kind of just like are out there in the
Yes,
ether,
yes.
and they'll land on someone, but if that person just doesn't do anything with it or like isn't able to initiate what that, idea wants, or like is able to manifest it, then it'll travel to someone else. And, then they'll make it happen. So that's why, you hear stories of like, oh, like, but this person stole my idea. It's like, oh, well,
Mm,
Like maybe like they were just able to like run with it further and make it happen. And because like these it's like this energy that just exists and I feel like we as artists like are kind of like more in tune with that kind of energetic force field of ideas.
Yes.
So now when I do get an idea, I try not to like sit on it so long.
Yeah. You're like, okay, the fish has come and nibbled at my hook. I'm gonna
Right.
reel it in first.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that definitely sounds like it resonates because like it sounds very similar to this like belief of the collective energy and the collective consciousness. And the idea for anyone who's not aware of what this is, but it's where we as a collective community, no matter how big or small we're talking on what scale, whether that's immediate community or much grander, that there is a sort of overall emotion or energy or thought that kind of rides within and sits in this space, in this like liminal, again, this like in between area where we can pick up on it. And this is why sometimes you'll notice that there will be these swings of ideas and inspiration in a community because we're all kind of being inspired by things online or in TV, and then we're all having this same kind of like brain wavelength of inspiration, and then it's all sitting there in the energy field because we're projecting those thoughts outward. So I think that's definitely within that realm of like, okay, there's like a thought form, there's this bubble that's just kind of floating around, and people can tap into it if they're open, if they're receiving like these like you like these bursts of inspiration of like okay, there's something there. And it's funny how you were talking about how like it becomes a very Saturnian process for you when you're creating art because I totally know what you're talking about. Because like it's funny because like if I was doing like visual development work in animation, I oh my gosh, I am so in the Saturn of it, of what's the structure here? What's the visual story? How do I depict this character to match the written description that they gave me? And I'm like almost overthinking how to design the character versus if I'm drawing, let's say, Chapel Rowan, because I really like Chapel Rowan's new song that dropped and I'm just drawing, listening to music. I'm not thinking about how to make the design appealing. I'm not thinking about how to make the pose better. I'm just like in the zone. I'm going with the flow. I'm listening to Chapel's music and I'm in it. And then by the time I'm done, then I try to reel it in with the Saturnian, like, okay, hold on, this arm doesn't quite. The perspective here is kind of off, the eyes a little, and then make all the like Saturnian tweaks. So it's funny because I definitely feel that as well. But it's a really nice reminder that as for anyone here who dabbles in art or plays with art, even if you're not professional, that it doesn't always have to be super structured, and it doesn't always have to be super like playful and like inspired. It can be both. It can bounce back and forth between the two, even like what you were talking about, where at the beginning there's this like playful inspiration, and then we get to work.
Yeah, I will say I am trying to find more of a balance because I feel sometimes I'm getting too structured. Like, because, some of the pieces in that show, like when people looked at it, they're like, oh, did you print this out of a computer? And it's like, no,
Oh
I painted it.
no.
Like, just because it's that, like, detailed and exact.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm like, well, I don't want people to think that. So now, like with these newer works that I'm trying to get going on right now, like I am trying to let myself be looser and
Mm,
yeah, find a balance where like, yeah, there's some structure. Like I've planned out where
yes.
things are generally going to go, but in terms of like brush strokes, instead of like being like this on the canvas, my plan is I'm gonna be
Yeah.
like further away with a longer brush. So then I can be a little more just looser. Um,
Yes.
so that's my goal. It just because, and also like I can explain my astrological chart because my Venus is in Virgo. So like when it comes to artistic endeavors, like I am prone to being like perfectionist. And
Mm,
so I am trying to like get past that
yeah.
and yeah, just let myself be looser. And I feel then that also let me produce more works because when you're so tight and rendered, then it takes
Yeah.
you longer to do.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, gotta get it just right, just so.
Right.
I'm curious, do you find that looking at your astrology, like your astrology chart, kind of like how you were saying, oh, I've got Venus, Virgo. Like, do you actually go and look at your astrological birth chart and look to see, okay, how can I take this knowledge and this information in this chart and learn from it in my art and do different or tap into those energies more to, apply that artistically?
Yeah, well, I think it's helped recently because in trying to like get more prepared or set up to approach galleries, like I learned one, I guess, piece of advice was like, well, you need like a clear kind of like elevator pitch for your work.
Mm,
And in thinking about like, okay, what is my pitch? Like it kind of just went back to my like astrological natal chart and the story that's there, which
mm,
is, I mean, this is getting deep into astrological terms, but yeah, my Venus is in the 12th house, and that planet represents me in my chart. That's the ascendant ruler. But I have a first house Saturn, which is exalted. So then
mm,
Saturn says a lot about me as a person as well. And since these planets are kind of bordering, like the 12th house, which is the liminal realm, and then the first
yeah,
house, which is like yourself and reality,
yeah,
then I kind of felt like kind of the pitch that I can tell people about my art is like, oh, I'm taking like these ideas from the liminal realm and then bringing them in, like materializing
yes,
them into
yes.
reality. And that narrative was very clear looking at my chart. And I was like, okay, but it makes sense also with my art. And also like what I make art about, which is like, that has to deal with your fifth house of creativity. And
Mm.
fifth house is ruled by Saturn. And so since Saturn, the planet, is
Ah,
in my first house, and it makes sense that I make work that is like biographical. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So you were able to kind of build this pitch for this gallery based on what you saw within your birth chart, it sounds
Yeah.
like. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I'll ever have the energy to do it, but I have been tempted if I was going to do some like kind of like an astrology podcast, I would want to like have it be about looking at the charts of creative people and kind of
Ah.
analyzing like why they do what they do by looking at their chart.
Oh, how cool. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So like that's already what you're doing for yourself and you're kind of inspired that maybe this is something that
Yeah,
you'll look
maybe one
into.
day.
Maybe one day. Yeah. No, that's so cool. Oh, I love that. And what advice would you give to people who are artists but are also inspired by magical practices and astrology?
Well, I mean, as an artist, you can technically make your own magic rituals. Like they don't have to be astrology based. They can
Yeah.
really be whatever you want. Like as long as you're putting like an intention into something, then,
Mm.
you can make it what you want. If you want to, do like a little dance before you start, your art,
Yes.
or, you want to like, I don't know, like drink like, like purified water or like, anything like that. You can whatever's comfortable or makes sense for you. Like I think that's totally like legitimate.
Yes.
Um, so like yeah, you don't have to exactly do what I'm doing, which is yeah, lighting a candle and burning incense. Although yeah, I mean I always like the smell and the ambient nature of those
Yes. Oh, of
things.
course.
Yeah, and yeah, in terms of like astrology, like if you're interested, I mean, I definitely would just encourage you to sign up to, someone's course. There's
Mm.
various ones out there. And like I've mentioned, yeah, I studied under Austin Coppock, and Ada Pembroke's class is a little more approachable because I know like Austin's a little more intense with his educational program. So yeah, and when I did it, I approached it more as like just for my own personal education and growth. Like I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily know at the time how deep I would go with it. And actually, when I started the pieces for that gallery show, the very first piece I created, I did not time astrologically because I just wasn't thinking like, oh, I can take
Mm.
advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although it was like visually inspired by astrology. I just didn't think I hadn't made the next step yet of like, oh, I can time these to to be magical. And it's kind of funny too, because I happened to start that painting while Mercury was retrograde, and I remember like having to redo like kind of
Oh
the first layer because I was trying to figure out how do I do a gradient
no.
with acrylic paints and like I had to go over it more than once and then afterwards when I realized like oh so when did I start this painting? It was like oh Mercury was
You're
retrograde.
like, that checks out.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's
thanks.
like also another reason why I time my paintings to try and be around like auspicious elections. So then it's also more likely to be easier for me to create a painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, if there's like tense aspects going on, like okay, that's probably just going to make it harder for me to like finish this piece.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, and I mean, I know other people like maybe they're inspired by like tarot or things like that,
yeah.
and can use that as a form of inspiration for your own art and create your own magical practice of like I don't know, like maybe you pull a card before you start your like art practice. I mean, that sounds actually pretty cool.
Yes.
So
No, that sounds amazing. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Have you done that?
I haven't,
Oh,
but maybe
this
I
was just a
will.
moment of
Yeah,
inspiration
I do happen
live.
to
I love
have a
it.
set of tarot cards at my like art desk, but I haven't used them.
Oh.
But I guess now I will.
You're like, okay, well, this is something to look
Yeah.
into. Oh, I love that. That's so cool. I really appreciate what you said about, being inspired with what you do and how you do it and, you know, doing these inspirational practices intuitively in a way that really resonates with you, whether you're, doing something magical like setting intentions and manifesting with a candle or even creating art. Because I feel like so many people can get stuck on those, like we were talking about, the Saturnian aspects of, oh, well, it should look this way, and people have talked about it in this and this way, and, you know, I'm inspired by how this person does things, so I'm just going to try to replicate that almost exactly. And it's like, no, 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 be you. Have your own voice. Be inspired, but also, like you said, dance around the room if that's what makes you like get into that magical space of like creation before actually getting into it. And I really appreciate that. I also really love this idea of like maybe you pull a tarot card before you do, something artistic and creative, whatever that is, whether that's music or writing or drawing, whether you're pulling a tarot card and asking yourself, what does this card mean for my story or the visual that I want to create? Or maybe the art on the card inspires you and you're like, oh, I really like the colors here, or I really like how this figure is posed in this way. And maybe that's your inspiration for a dance or a song or a drawing. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Well, thank you so much, Terry, for joining me in the parlor today. It was such a pleasure talking to a fellow artist and a fellow intuitive, creative, magical person. I'm sure everybody here is just itching to go look at your art now and go find you online. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, so my artwork lives online at terihc.art, and that's TERIHC.art. And I also, for my astrology practice, that's a separate web page, which is cosmicconsults.co. And so that's where you can find information about booking an astrology reading with me or my husband, since we kind of work together now on that side of the business. And
Yay!
um, yeah, and in terms of like upcoming events, I am scheduled to appear at Three Sisters Tea and Coffee in Burbank on Saturday, May 10th. And I'll be there offering like mini astrology readings, and I will also have some of my art prints and also my art book from my gallery show. I usually always bring that with me to events. So yeah, I'll have those with me all in person.
Beautiful. And if anyone's listening, because I'm not sure when this episode's going to come out, but
Okay.
if that date has passed, don't worry, friends. Terry is a friend of Three Sisters Coffee and Tea and will definitely be back for future markets. So make sure that you're following Terry. Make sure that you're following my page as well. You'll see updates in regards to those events. And yeah, so people can actually and that's something I wanted to bring up too. People can actually buy your book that has the collection of pieces and that poem in it, correct?
Yes, yeah. Since it was a self-published book, you really can only get it from me. I do make it available online, but yeah, if you happen to live in the area, then you can also find me at events to purchase it, and I'll even sign it for you if you're interested. Um, and oh, another item that I have with me specifically when it comes to the kind of astrology themed, I guess, tabling events that I do is I also have these scented magic candles that I've been making. And I started making them honestly for myself, just because purchasing them from Sphere and Sundry was kind of like making me like I don't know, it was just too expensive
Yeah, yeah.
of a I don't know hobby, I guess. And so I was like, okay, I gotta learn to just make my own candles. So I did that, and I made enough that I was like, oh, I guess I could start like offering these to, people,
Yes.
and they've actually become pretty popular. So,
I
but
love them. Hold on, I
they
have mine here.
only those candles specifically, though, I only make available at in-person events just because I don't necessarily want to make a whole like online business out of it. Like I do that for my art, but yeah, the candles are kind of more of a fun project. So yeah.
I love it. It's so pretty that I still haven't had a chance to burn it because I'm like, I don't, but it smells amazing. Sometimes I'll just take the cap off and put it nearby my desk just so I can. But this is your Mercury candle that you had made and sold at a previous event at Three Sisters. And I mean, if you're watching the video, it's so pretty, and you can really see all the love and intention that went into making this. It's gorgeous, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
smells gorgeous.
Thanks. Yeah. So whenever I do see a nice alignment of planets, if I can do both, I'll actually make candles and also start like art pieces all within like
Busy.
the same. Yeah, it's a very small window of time. But I have made it happen.
I love it. Well, thank you so much again, Terry, for sharing your creative insights, your astrological, magical insights, and for inspiring us all. I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast today.
Yeah, of course. It's been fun.
Thank you.